Hi everybody, Beth here, and welcome to the third segment of the Fighter Pilot's Guide to Living, where we're focusing once again on the incredible story of retired Rear Admiral Frederick "Bad Fred" Lewis. And if you've missed the first two episodes, I highly suggest catching up, getting some insight on just the trajectory of Bad Fred's career and the sheer quantity of amazing things that he witnessed during his naval career. But today's portion of the interview is focusing on actually a little bit backwards. We're backtracking a bit to Vietnam, talking about the John Alt report and how that led to the creation of Top Gun, but also talking about a really moving story that Bad Fred witnessed many years later that related to an incident in Vietnam. I don't want to tease that too much. I want you to hear it from Bad Fred because it's a very moving account. But then we move forward and go through to the 1981 deployment on the Nimitz that Bad Fred did, in which two of the Tomcat pilots shot down Libyan aircraft. And this is, it's a famous incident. It took place in the Gulf of Sidra. And Bad Fred talks about kind of the overarching reasons that it occurred, and then some of the behind the scenes things that were going on at the time, including the fact that he was glad that Snort did not take it upon himself to go and engage other Libyan fighters who had not engaged him. So there, and we end actually with a really funny Snort story. So without further ado, I'm going to let Bad Fred take it away. Bad Fred, it's so good to be back with you right now. And we're going to talk about something that I didn't ask you about last time, the John Alt report during the Vietnam, your Vietnam flying time. What can you tell me about that? I don't know anything about it. So just please enlighten me.
Oh, great, Beth. Yeah, it's a seminal event in naval aviation for many reasons, of course. But, in terms of my involvement, as I saw the whole story unfold, was that after I had detached from VF-74 and they walked down the passageway to a new squadron, VF-33, embarked on America. After the Forrestal fire, 6 of us had in the air wing had volunteered to go back right away back to combat. So, and my assignment was to get transferred from VF-74 to VF-33, which I embarked with them, trained with them up in the winter and the summer of 1968. And then we deployed in April of 1968 on USS America. Made the transit again around the world across the Atlantic, around Africa, Indian Ocean, up to the Philippines, and then ultimately in the Tonkin Gulf. So from the time that the Forrestal fire happened till I was back again, about 1 year elapsed time frame. So it was a pretty quick turnaround to do all that. And we immediately engaged in combat operations when we got on Yankee Station in the Gulf of Tonkin, flying some standard missions of that time, some alpha strikes and some road recce and reconnaissance missions and cap missions and so forth. And my squadron, VF-33, had a bunch of really good pilots and a lot of really, really strong junior officers. And we had great leadership at the top. Our commanding officer and XO were really top drawer guys, and they really got us ready to go on that deployment as opposed to the deployment on Forrestal when we were ill prepared and not ready for combat in any way, shape, or form. 180 out in VF-33, we were ready to go. So we started our flying. It wasn't very long after we arrived on station in the early summer of 1968 that we had a couple of MiG encounters. Each encounter was made up of a section of F-4s against MiG-17s and MiG-21s. And with no loss on our side, and sadly no loss on their side either. They're pretty failed mission. And basically in each one of those missions, different pilots, same squadron, same airplane, the F-4J Phantom, as they encountered the MiGs and made the intercept of the MiGs over land at a sort of a medium altitude. They fired Sparrow missiles, and the missiles just fell off the airplane. No motor fire on the missiles; they just fell off the airplane. So there's a big miss there. Short time later, another encounter occurred with the same results. Missiles, Sparrow, AIM-70 Sparrow missiles falling off the airplane, not doing what they're supposed to do. So that's not good when the weapon doesn't work and you're trying to deploy it in combat. Obviously, for the reasons that we all can understand, it's not a good situation to be in. Well, that had not only occurred to us, but occurred elsewhere to some other folks as well. And as a consequence, the Navy put together and appointed a gent by the name of Captain John Alt, who had up a team of guys to come out, fighter guys to come out to Westpac, where we were, and take a look at our systems and our airplanes and their processes and the maintenance training and the pilot aircrew training for the use of the weapons. And they made some really concrete recommendations that came out as a result of the Alt report. And probably the most significant one that most everybody will remember was that they recommended that the Navy stand up a fighter weapons school. That was the initial impetus behind getting the Top Gun started. Very important step in naval aviation to make that happen. So it actually stood up. That was 1968, but it actually didn't really stand up until 1972 when Top Gun began. So very important for the Navy. Well, I made that deployment, of course, and concluded that in late 1968, and then went to Test Pilot School. I think we talked about Test Pilot School the last time, didn't we? So
we did.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it, and I was so amazed by what you got to do, and it seemed like an incredible experience to be able to take part in.
The immediate effect on us, our squadron, which we lost a couple airplanes in combat, both 3 airplanes shot down in combat, and one of which resulted in the rescue of the pilot and the NFO from our squadron. That rescue effort was made by a guy by the name of the helicopter pilot, was a guy named Clyde Lassen. And Clyde won the Medal of Honor for that rescue. His co-pilot won the Navy Cross, and the 2 crewmen in the back got Silver Stars for that nighttime rescue of a pilot and an NFO from our squadron. Really harried story. That's worthy of an episode all in and of itself. But that rescue effort, so we got them back aboard, and they were, dirty, and we cleaned them up and got the guys back flying again in 24 hours. So we didn't waste any time. Those things happen.
I'd love to hear more about it. If you want to go into more detail, I would definitely love to hear that.
Oh, it's well, they were the names will remain. I won't release the names, of course, but anyway, the NFO pilot was a good pilot. NFO was an okay NFO. Not the greatest, but he was all right. It was a nighttime mission in an area called about the central part of North Vietnam, an area called Vinh, near the city of Vinh. And they were on a night road recce mission, and got hit by a SAM, and multiple SAMs were fired at them, and the one that got them, they just couldn't get away from, and hit them, and they both had to eject. They both came down, and as they're coming down in their parachute at night over the rice paddies, they could hear one another. They knew the other guy was in close proximity to the other one, so they hit the ground, both of them pretty close together, adjacent rice paddies, and they were able to get together and start to move away from their landing site because they could hear the North Vietnamese farmers and then soldiers start to become awake, because it was early in the morning hours of that day, so it was dark black, as a matter of fact. Anyway, they made their way out of the rice paddies, and one particular point they had to cross a canal, and so the pilot jumped in the water and swam across the canal, and the boat said, "Why'd you jump in the water?" So I had to swim across the canal. He said, "Well, there's a footbridge right here." So he took the footbridge across, went to the other side, and pulled his pilot out of the water. So he took the shortcut. Anyway, they continued to move out, and they happened to see in the starlight a hillside. So they made their way to the hillside. It was very densely covered with brush and so forth. They crawled up the hill. And meantime, this is all going on. The rescue effort was put in place with A7 standing holding overhead as the commander of the rescue cap. Anyway, they called in some strikes, they dropped some bombs, and the North Vietnamese soldiers, the people on the ground, were still pursuing the pilot and the NFO. and started pushing up towards where they were the helicopter, an H-2, smallish ASW helicopter we used as a combat SAR. They did really fantastic work over there. They took the vector into the site where the shoot down had occurred. They were in contact with the crew on the ground with their rescue radios, just survival radios, and we were able to communicate with them. And the pilot and the NFO were together at this time, right, evading together, and they both saw the helicopter come in because the guy had turned his lights on, so that the lights on at night, and a helicopter moving very slowly overnight. He's a perfect target, and North Vietnamese were taking advantage of that. Well, Clyde flew the helicopter in real close to the hill because he knew where the crew was, and landed. Put it on the ground with the lights on. Meanwhile, they were taking fire from small arms fire from the North Vietnamese soldiers that are around, and they happened to see the crew, the pilot and the NFO they were trying to rescue, and told them on the radio, haul butt here, buddy. Come on out here and we'll get you aboard the helicopter. So they ran towards the helicopter. The crewmen leaned down, grabbed them one each by their belt, and dragged them in and threw them inside the helicopter, threw them inside, and then got airborne right away. And they took them out to a waiting the SAR destroyer, search and rescue destroyer that's in position just off the coast. Landed, and they got them back to our ship. So for that effort, the helicopter crewmen, as I mentioned, received those awards. But fast forward now, years later, and we're to think about being at the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. We had a big seminar, and we were had a panel session talking about rescue in Vietnam and how guys had survived and so forth in that experience. This is about 1995 or so, 1996. And I was moderating the panel, and Clyde Lassen was one of the speakers on the panel, and the other crewmen were there as well. The whole crew was there for this event. And after we went through and we all gave little talks about what had happened that particular night, and it came to Clyde Lassen's turn to get his presentation and talk about it, what he did, what he saw that night. And after he concluded, he asked the museum director to come forward, which he did. Came up on the stage, and Clyde he had his Medal of Honor around his neck. He took his Medal of Honor off around his neck and handed it to the museum director to put in position in the museum as a gift from him to the museum. It's there today. No one knew it at the time, but Clyde was very sick, very ill, and he passed away 6 months later. So he made that gift to the museum, because he knew what was going to happen to him. But I thought very poignant, very moving, as you can imagine, event, this next thing for people to experience. Because we told stories about war, air war in North Vietnam. So I hate to end on another maudlin note, but that actually occurred. Go ahead, Beth, you're going to ask the question?
Oh, I was just going to say that's an incredible story, and I can just imagine the heft of that moment of him passing on that medal.
Emotion, yeah, absolutely, very just absolutely incredible. So let's fast forward now. Let's get back up to where we were.
Sure.
Program.
Yeah, we left off in 74. I had just asked you about starting the RAG, and I'm curious about the difference as you're training up F4 pilots to fly on the F-14, and then you're training up new pilots who've never flown the F4 and never flown the F-14. Did they take to it differently? Did you notice certain things about those different kinds of pilots as they were learning this new big jet?
Well, to sort of set the stage for this, now we were in after I returned from a deployment with VF-14 in F-14. I transitioned already, and we were back at Oceana. We had one F-14 training squadron at the time. That was VF-124 out of Miramar. That was the RAG, the F4 RAG. But we knew they couldn't handle doing the transition for the entire fleet. It would take too long, so we started another site for training for another RAG, and that was at Oceana. So the skeletal force appointed to start that thing. Fortunately, I was fingered as a guy to head that up. And we were really part of VF-101, the F4 rank. So we became sort of a separate department within the F4 rank itself and called it the F-14 component. I had 3 or 4 guys working for me. They're all really good people, fantastic pilots and NFOs working with me as we basically started our own, the F-14 rank from scratch there at Oceana. Not necessarily, I should say from scratch, because we pirated all the stuff that they had out at Miramar, the RAG, and all their, the lesson guides and instructional manuals and so forth. What we used. So we got it up and running in pretty short order, in about 9 or 10 months, and we were fully operational and ready to start training people. And so the first squadrons that we trained at Oceana, they were actually the 4th and the 5th squad, no, the 3rd and the 4th squadrons to stand up. I beg your pardon, that's not right. 6th and 7th squadron. Anyway, VF-41 and VF-84. And we put both the officer, the aircrew through their paces and trained pilots and the NFOs, and also the maintenance personnel. There we had a maintenance training pipeline that we had to get up and running, which we did. So at the time, people were just the attitude and the sense of being there, a mission there at Oceana at that time. In fact, we were responsible for painting on the side of the hangar Tomcat country, and we got a new call sign for radio transmission. We selected gunfighter. We were the gunfighters of VF-101. The pilots and NFO that we transitioned and the new ones that we trained were all really pumped and ready to go. And it wasn't too difficult a transition for anyone really. The airplane flew. If the Tomcat was easy to fly, except for one point in the flight envelope, and that was at the back end of the ship and landing. It had a sort of a Dutch roll characteristic to it. It was you didn't have to hammer it around, but you had to what you were doing, coordinating power and control inputs and so forth. And it sort of waddled a little bit at the back end of the boat. So that's why it got the sub nickname of being called the Turkey, because of the way it sort of came down on the glide, so what it looked like, so it fluttered down. But in terms of the attitude, people were really 10 feet tall people painted purple because they're part of something new, a new airplane, a new capability, and a fantastic new capability for the fleet with the weapon system that the airplane had at the time, with this Phoenix missile and all 9 radar system. Of course, everything else that we'd done before in the F4 and the Sparrow missile and the Sidewinder. And this one, too, was so exciting because we had a gun. We had a 20-millimeter cannon, which we did not have in the F4J, F4B. Having a gun, but, for a fighter pilot, to gun somebody is just the be-all, end-all of dogfighting in a fighter airplane.
That's incredible. I actually, growing up, had a cat named Phoenix because my dad was the cat would come out of nowhere and come after you. And I guess my dad thought of the Phoenix in the Tomcat and named the cat after the weapon system. So let
me give you
always cracks me up.
Related to that.
Yeah.
Kind of funny, actually. Years later, and this is back in the early 2000s, my wife and I were at a social function, and a retired Navy 3-star came up to me, and this is a black ties cocktail party dinner celebration and so forth. But anyway, he introduced himself. I hadn't known him from before, and we started chatting and said, you're Bad Fred, right? That's what I'm called. Yes, sir. And said, well, let me tell you an interesting story. We went to an air show. He and his family went to an air show at Oceana, and there was an F-14 on static display. And that canopy rail of the static display had my name on it. It had Commander Bad Fred Lewis on the side of the airplane. And he said, our kids were looking for a name for our cat. So they saw that name Bad Fred, so they named the cat Bad Fred. So Bad Fred the cat had a nice, happy, comfortable life for a long time. I think Bad Fred the cat lasted for about 12, 15, 14 years, something like that. and they had the cat cremated and then put it in an urn, and they had the urn down in the basement of the home, appropriately labeled as Bad Fred. So Bad Fred the cat is in an urn in the basement of this guy's house in Washington, D.C.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. It is. It's such a great call sign. I'm not surprised that it got picked up by some kids who needed a creative nickname for their cat. And my goodness, 12 to 15 years, that is that cat had a great life.
So back to what
That's
we're
very
talking about.
funny.
Back.
Yeah, let's go back to what was, you say you're all 10 feet tall. I mean, when you look back on the periods of your, when you talk about pre-Vietnam, right? You said that you didn't feel like you guys were training quite properly for what was ahead. And it almost sounds like that was a more uncertain period compared to what you're describing in 74 and beyond, with this just like gung-ho feeling of power with the Tomcat. Am I taking a leap there, or is that
Oh, no, you're not at all. We actually felt that way. We felt, with the Tomcat on site, with the capabilities that I already described. I mean, we were 10 feet tall and painted purple. We were the envy of fighter aviation around the world. Everybody, it became, as we all know, at least who are from that community, understand that the Tomcat, because of the Top Gun movies and so forth, it has become an iconic of fighter aviation, not unlike at all the Spitfire in World War II in the United Kingdom. Spitfire was iconic as far as the Royal Air Force is concerned. It still is, so it's had a life of many, many, many years. And I can guarantee you that the same thing will occur with the Tomcat. I mean, it's iconic, and it will be around. The stories, Tomcat stories, and Tomcat was able to accomplish and provide the fleet with the capability that it did. That'll live for a very, very long time.
absolutely? The lore is just, yeah, everyone loves the Tomcat. What was it like? So your first tour with the Tomcat was as XO and CO of VF 142 on the Eisenhower, am I correct, in
Yes.
1976? What can you tell me about how that went?
Well, it went great because I had such a fantastic squadron, not the least of whom, remember the squadrons that we talked about before, was Snort. Snort was my squadron LSO, and a fantastic pilot. And I think I told you about the competition that we had about buying dinner, landing grades, and so forth. But other people in the squadron were also really fantastic. And maintenance personnel were just absolutely superb. We had some growing pains that we had to get through on the America, made a full complete deployment on the America, and then a partial deployment on the Eisenhower. Then I detached from my next duty assignment, but had a change of command ceremony in Naples, Italy. But part of that was, again, using the weapon system, using the airplane to showcase it around the fleet, and to understand that, so that our potential adversaries can understand that we had a capability that is really significant. And we knew that. And it's about that time they had the Achille Lauro affair with the intercept of the Egyptian airliner. It wasn't my squadron, but another ship intercepted the airliner with some terrorists aboard taking hostages. And the Tomcats intercepted the airplane, and made it forced landing in Sigonella. So we got the terrorists and so forth. That's another long story. You can write a book about that particular episode. But anyway, the airplane, the capability that we'd always wanted, and we were trying to exploit that capability in which way we could.
Sure. I mean, I would love to hear that story. I'm trying to think, because was this like a PLO kind of terrorist? Like,
Yes, I don't remember the names of the people who were involved, but it was
okay.
At the time, Tomcat was front and center again, part of the action, and featured very highly in the positive results that we had in terms of forcing the airline to force land in Sigonella, and then capture of the terrorists and release of the hostages. Nobody got hurt, which was fantastic.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I wonder if that could happen, you know, I would hope that that would happen today.
We're going to come back to the Tomcat and the Mediterranean theater and adversaries, potential adversaries.
Oh yeah, the Gulf of Sidra deployment.
Yeah, well,
Yes, that's
we'll
coming up.
talk to you
I
about that.
definitely want to hear about
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
the whole
yeah.
how that came to happen. So
Fantastic period of
it
time.
sounds like the America and Eisenhower deployment was like show of force. Like here, like you're saying,
Show
this
of
is what we
force,
have.
show of force, but also maintaining our commitment in the Mediterranean for many years. The commitment that the United States had in that theater was to maintain two aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean at all times. At all times, they had to keep them there. So the Russians they would deploy, from time to time down to Syria. There's a port there in Syria that they operated out of. So they always had a trawler with assigned to trail the aircraft carriers and follow them. They were with us all the time. And it was just a small boat ship, large boat, small ship, a trawler. And they follow us all over the place. But, anyway, maintain that show of force. And also there's another capability that I can't talk about that we had that we were also in position to execute if we had to. So an emergency capability that I can't talk about. But anyway.
That's very cool. Can you tell me if it's a capability that the Iranians have since they have the F-14 now and they
No.
still use it? No, that's good to hear. That's so refreshing to hear. Wow. So it was in the middle of that deployment that you have your change of command in Naples, and then is that when you became the commander of Fighter Wing 1?
No, it was later on that happened
Okay.
in my career. When I detached from my command tour in VF-142, I came back to Oceania, and I became I think my job was Chief of Staff to Fighter Wing 1, from a guy by the name of Captain Sam Flynn. Great pilot and a great fighter pilot, a warrior through and through. So wonderful to have the opportunity to work for him for about a year. And I beg your pardon, I'm getting it mixed up. Anyway, for Fighter Wings before my command tour. After my command tour, I went to Air Wing training at Air Land. So I was responsible for training the whole fleet, looking after all the squadrons and trying to help them and succeed in any way I could. And then from that position, I was only there for about a year and a half. That position, I made captain, promoted captain, and I moved over to Fighter Wings, commander Fighter Wing 1. That sequence. So,
Amazing. How did Flynn get his start? I'd love to hear about, you speak so highly of him, so I feel like it would be interesting to hear about his history in the jet.
Oh, when I carrier called on the America from VF-121, he was an LSO in VF-121 at the time, and as lieutenant, and so he was the LSO that got me worked up and ready to go to CQ and the F-4 Phantom. And fast forward a little bit in both of our careers, he went on to become the CO XO of VF-31 on Saratoga when they made a Westback deployment. And Sam had a MiG encounter that was successful and shot down the MiG-21. That airplane, by the way, that he was in when he got that kill against the MiG-21 is the one that's in the Udvar-Hazy Museum now, the one that's at Dulles Airport. That's the same airplane he flew when he shot down the MiG-21. Same year.
What was his call sign?
Sam Flynn. I don't remember his call sign. I don't remember his call sign. We just called him Sam. I call him Sir mostly because he was the captain and I was the commander.
Sure, I've taken my kids there, and we must have seen it then.
You must have, because it's kind of there's an F-14 parked nearby, and right, the F-4, the Phantom and the F-14 are parked pretty close together, and the museum, and the Phantom is the one that he flew during that MiG kill. Very
neat. Yeah, I sent the names to my dad. My dad's like, "Oh yeah, he's a good shit." I'm like, "Yeah, of course, of course, everybody knows this is a small community,
Sam he's the one who originated the phrase that became worldwide known. The phrase of "speed is life." That was Sam's mantra. Speed is life. Okay, that is a big kill. Shoot down.
That's amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that phrase. Tell me, I would love to hear about the MiG shoot down if you want to share that story.
I don't remember the details of his shoot down, to tell you the truth, but I do know
Okay.
we got the kill. We had one MiG encounter on my cruise with VF-33 on America. That was the pilot Roy Cash and his NFL. I don't remember Ed, first names Ed. Anyway, they shot down a MiG-21 after the alt visit and so forth. And the MiG encounter used a Sidewinder to shoot down a MiG-21. Anyways, I'm kind of skipping around here a little bit. I hope it's not too confusing to you. But I'm telling you about these things as they come to my mind. I think they're important enough to something that are interesting to me. Maybe not to anybody else, but it'd be interesting to me. Maybe you're interested too, Beth.
Oh, I'm very interested, and I'm sure that other people will be. Like, this is the kind of thing that I love, and when I sit with my dad every time I'm home, and everything skips from one incident to another incident, and it doesn't matter when it happened or where. Yeah, I love this. I just want to hear you tell stories about flying. So
okay,
you just keep telling stories about flying.
Well, let's see. I was thinking about another incident here, but where are we now chronologically?
We are somewhere around you being commander of Fighter Wing 1 and somewhere before the Nimitz deployment to the Gulf of Sidra. So anywhere in that frame. In fact, this would be a great time because I was going to ask you after that deployment about your favorite memories in the jets.
The way it kind of comes up is that after my assignment, after I worked for San Flynn as chief of staff, I was selected for an Air Wing Command, and I went to my CAG tour, first CAG tour on Nimitz. And we had a fantastic crew on Nimitz. We had a great skipper, a guy named Jack Bassler, who became a very dear friend over time. And we had a great air wing, and I had a fantastic, VF-41, VF-84 with the two squadrons. And I had some real superstars in both of those squadrons. And I had Jay Johnson, was the skipper of one of the VF-84. And a whole bunch of other guys who were just fantastic. The A7 guys, Captain Phil Gay, and a whole bunch of other guys they're all really top level. Every single man, every single crew there just really sharpened to a nice edge in terms of readiness to deploy. And right after we chopped into the Mediterranean, we got wind of something being stood up, something called FON-OPS, F-O-N ops, Freedom of Navigation Operations. And Law of the Sea says each country has they own out to the 12-mile marker, and after that it's international waters. And while we were there, Colonel Gaddafi was the dictator of Libya at the time, and he declared the line of death, which was a latitude line, went from one coast of Libya to another across a body of water called the Gulf of Sidra. SIDRA. And he had a pretty good stable of military capabilities and stable of aircraft. He had stretched out all the way across the coast of Libya, about 3 or 4 different airfields that they operated from. They had Russian airplanes, they had some French airplanes, and really good capability. But he had declared this line of death, which is about 100 miles off the coast of Libya. Of course, that's well beyond what we recognize in the U.S. as the limit of the 12-mile limit. So we said, no, and we're kind of doing the same sort of thing in the South China Sea today with China and their declaration of their own water, their own waterways. Still very similar sort of things happening there. Well, in the Mediterranean, the Sixth Fleet, it became the U.S. policy that we don't recognize that, and also we're going to exercise. We'll steam through that area to show him, and the rest of the world that we don't recognize his 100-mile limit. So set up a big operation, 2 aircraft carriers, and 4 SOs one, Nimitz was the other. We were embarked on Nimitz. And we developed a plan where it set up CAP stations, combat air patrol stations, down close to the coast, inside the 100-mile limit, but outside the 12-mile limit. And we would just show that we observed the 12-mile limit, and anything beyond that, anybody can fly or steam their ships or sail their sailboats or whatever outside. It's not the property of the country that made that declaration. That we'll do. So it was scheduled for a 2-day operation, and started off in the morning. Obviously, we set up a plan to have people on a couple of CAP stations close to the shore there, not real close, but inside of 100 miles. And so put Tomcats on both of those stations. When the thing first began, we had no idea what sort of reaction we'd get from the Libyan Air Force. So we stirred them up pretty well, I think. So within about 2 hours of the operation beginning, we had two airplanes from VF-41 on Camp Station down to the south. He was led by Commander Hank Kleeman, who was the commanding officer of the squadron. His backseater was Dave Van Lett, who was his NFO, later became a pilot and retired as a 2-star, in fact. And the other airplanes by Larry Muzinski, who was the pilot. The backseater was Jim Anderson, the NFO. So they're on Camp Station. They got our E-2 Airborne got a contact with some aircraft coming off the coast of Libya. Gave our guys a vector down towards them, with to stay outside the 12-mile limit, of course, which is what they did. And as they approached head-on to the MiGs, one of the MiGs fired an ATOL missile, which is a heat-seeking missile. Fired it head-on. Well, that's out of the envelope, but the rules of engagement at the time, it had to be hostile intent. The enemy aircraft had to demonstrate hostile intent. You just could not go out and just sort of haphazardly shoot down anything you see that's airborne. It has to be demonstrated as hostile intent. Well, firing that missile at the aircraft is obviously hostile intent. So they went to the merge, past the two sections, two Su-22 fitters from the Libyan, it's a Russian airplane. And they fired the ATOL missile, which is a heat seeker, head on. Well, it's a missile that should be used in the rear quarter. But for some reason, they decided to try to shoot it head on our guys. Bad mistake. That's obviously hostile intent. Our guys, Hank and Larry Muzinski, did a couple of turns. Hank took one of the fitters, and Muzinski took the other. And of course, Muzinski comes up on the radio, and I'm down in combat on the ship listening to all this happen on the radio. And I hear Muzinski asked the skipper on me, well, this is almost a direct quote. He said, "Skipper, I'm behind the guy. What'll I do? What'll I do?" And then everybody in the whole world was up in that net and said, "Shoot, shoot, shoot." And I was yelling, screaming, "Shoot." They're doing it good. But so finally, we got the word from the skipper, said, "Shoot," which he did. And Hank fired at the lead Su-22. Almost simultaneously, their Sidewinder missiles impacted the Su-22, both of them. There's a little bit of difference in the timing, but pretty close together. Shot them both down. Both Libyan pilots ejected, and our guys could see the 2 parachutes going down towards the water. And then we later found out that they had been rescued successfully by the Libyan Navy. So they were killed. So lots of hooting and hollering going on. You can imagine on the ship. They came back to the ship and landed and took them immediately down to IOIC, the intelligence center. Was sort of big long-term debrief, because we had a flag officer, an admiral on board. He was very interested in what was going to happen. So reconstructed the whole thing, and they got it ready to go for reports back to the home plate. We heard later on that right after it happened, the Secretary of Defense was Caspar Weinberger, and he was advised of what had occurred. The Navy had shot down 2 Libyan airplanes, and he got the word to he woke the President Ronald Reagan, called Reagan and woke him up, and Reagan just said he just had something very simple to say, our boy's okay. The response was yes. He went back to sleep. So, but our activity there in that position in the Med and in the Gulf of Sidra continued for the rest of that day there. And when that the shootdown had occurred, Snort was airborne, and he was on another cap station, but they were engaged with some Libyan aircraft, MiG-25, which is kind of a big fighter. It's not really basically an interceptor, but a big airplane. In fact, Victor Belenko had defected to Japan at one point with the MiG-25. And when he did that, landed in Japan, of course, the CIA got a hold of that machine. They tore it down to their bolts and everything, get all the intel out of it they possibly could. But they reassembled it, and we actually did give the airplane back to the Russians, inside of a year later. Anyway, so Snort's he's wrestling with the MiG-25, and I thought to myself, oh my God, Snort's wrestling that MiG-25. I hope he doesn't just take this as a carte blanche to go ahead and engage everybody and start shooting everybody down, which could have happened. Fortunately, he restrained himself enough to realize that there wasn't any hostile intent where he was. It was only one specific area and one specific incident, one specific encounter. So he deferred from pulling the trigger and shooting down a MiG-25, but he was pretty excited about it when he came back. Oh, bad Fred, you should have cleared me to shoot. No way, man. Anyway, they recovered, lots of celebrations and so forth. And we continued the operations the next day. I had actually, when the shootdown occurred, and they were on their way back, and after I spoke with them, I got my flight gear and jumped in an airplane, got airborne myself to get down and see what other action might happen, what I might see. It turned out that it was later in the day, the Libyans were still flying out over the water. So I was in a VF-84 airplane with Jay Johnson on my wing. So the two of us were flying down and we got a vector down to a couple of Libyan fighters that come out and take a look at us. And it turned out that they were Mirage F-1s, which is a French-built single-seat fighter. It's an okay airplane. It could go real fast in a straight line. Couldn't turn very well. But we joined up on them, and Jay took the wingman, who was the guy in trail, and I took the leader, and we both rendezvoused on those airplanes. And I got up real close to the guy. I mean, we were flying real tight Blue Angel parade on him, and I wanted to make sure I was on the side where he could see my Phoenix missile that I had strapped on the airplane. And we had Phoenix, we had Sparrows, and we had Sidewinders. The airplane's configured in that fashion. So he got to see that. And they didn't do much. They didn't take, the turns were no greater than about 30 to 40 degrees angle of bank. And they did one circuit, and then they headed back down south, back to Libya. And then we came back and landed and so forth. The day after that, we headed off of our station there in the middle of the Mediterranean off the coast of Libya, and we were ordered to get to Naples, Italy, post haste, because the entire world wanted to know what had happened. So we got back to Naples the following day. We had the boats come aboard to come out to the ship, loaded with reports. So the big press conference on the ship to talk about the incident and what had occurred and so forth. And so that the media was aboard for about maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then we got rid of them, got them off the ship. So everybody was pretty happy with it, and then when we returned, we found out that some enterprising young guy decided to make a T-shirt up, and the T-shirt said "Navy to Libya 0." Was printed on the T-shirt. You may have one at home. Your dad had one. Anyway, we made a lot of money and sold a lot of T-shirts. I'll tell you that. And it's another thing that was a real plus for naval aviation and for the Tomcat. Real plus.
You give me 1 second, Bad Fred. I think I have that shirt. I'm going to go check because I have another one. And if not, I want you to tell me what it means because Puke gave it to my mom.
Oh.
Yeah. And was Puke on that deployment?
He may have been. I don't remember.
Okay. Or he might have. I want to see. I know exactly where it is. It'll take me 30 seconds.
That's it. Yeah, there you go. That's it, Beth. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Very good.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
The score was U.S. Navy 2, Libya 0.
That's so funny. I had no idea. And now, and it at the bottom, because of course,
I mean,
anytime,
yeah,
anytime, Gaddafi, baby.
yeah, there you go. You have
Gotta
that
love. Yeah, that's so funny. I'm
stuff.
gonna,
Now you know what it's all about. So,
yeah, I'm gonna have to get rid of all that dead time in here, but when I had to find it, but luckily I could. That's so funny. Um, wow. And so there's another story about that you told me about Snort in this whole this period too, where right after the media blitz, everybody
yeah,
got to go
after
ashore
you,
for a minute.
that's a
Can you tell that one?
back in the days when things were really colorful. We really had some colorful people. Snort was probably one of the most colorful guys I ever met in my life. But anyway, so yeah, so after the all the press departed and things settled down on Nimitz and they're trying to get back to life as normal and so forth. We did have Liberty that day, that afternoon, in the evening in Naples. Guys went off and did their own thing, their own way, got some dinner or whatever. And some beer was also probably in order. So anyway, as 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 far as the follow-up story was concerned with Snort was that Snort got left the ship with some other folks. I won't say who they were, but anyway, so a group of about 4 guys, maybe it's 5 anyway. So they came to shore at Fleet Landing, and right next to Fleet Landing at the same pier was this big, huge yacht. And they were walking down the pier to go into town, into the city of Naples, and they looked up at the side of the yacht, and this guy was standing there leaning on the railings. And he said, "Hey, how are you doing, you guys? Are you guys from the Nimitz?" They said, "Yeah, yes, sir, we are." He says, "Come on aboard my ship. Would you like to take a look at it?" They said, "Sure." So they embarked on this big, humongous yacht. This guy gave a whole cook's tour of the whole ship from stem to stern. It was an amazing vessel. A very, very wealthy guy. I think he was a gun runner or something. In fact, anyway, he turned out an Arabian gun runner back in the day. Anyway, so gave him a big run of the ship. They said, "Well, stay aboard the ship, stay aboard my yacht here, and we'll have some dinner and we'll have a party or so." So they did. Had a big dinner in the salon there on the ship, and had Max beers and champagne and so forth. And they're having a great time, and all of a sudden they feel this vibration occur on the ship, on the deck of the ship, and then they look out the portal and they start to see some movement going on. Oh my God, what's happening here? And the guy said, "Oh, we're getting underway. We're leaving Naples." I said, "Well, we can't leave. We can't go with you." He said, "Oh, come on, I'm just going up to Sardinia. I'll drop you off at Sardinia, and you can come back to the ship that way." I said, "No, no, no." I said, we don't want to have to face bad Fred if we miss ship movement or something like that." So the guy says, "Okay, by this time they're departing Naples Bay." So the yacht owner puts a couple of runabout boats, speedboats, in the water, drops them in the water. And each speedboat dropped a case of Dom Perignon champagne. And so they had something to drink on the way back. So they carried him back to the pier. Well, the following morning, I went down to my office and I heard that something had happened that was kind of interesting the night before. I said, "Well, who was involved?" And they told me who was involved. And I said, "Well, I can understand now. Well, something really colorful must have occurred." So I said, and they said Snort was involved. I said, "All right, call Snort and get him down here to the office immediately, ASAP." So about 10 minutes later, Snort comes walking into the office with all bleary-eyed, and he had, men, when they cut themselves shaving, they sometimes use a piece of toilet paper to staunch the blood flow. So he had little pieces of paper all over his face. And he shaved so quickly, he cut himself several times shaving. And so I said, "Okay, now what did you do this time?" And he relayed that whole story to me about what happened the night before. Just another colorful incident in the life of a Navy fighter squadron.
I'm saying if I ever get reincarnated, I want to come back and be a fighter pilot. It was not going to be my lot in life this time, but the stories.
To wrap it all up, this is brings it kind of back down to earth after telling that story, thinking about that incident and so forth. Sadly, some years later, Hank Kleeman was commanding officer of VX-4 at Point Magoo, and he was flying an F-18, and they landed at flying down to San Diego to go to a training conference of some sort down there. But he landed at Miramar, and they had a port main landing gear collapse on landing, and it caused the airplane to roll up, go off the side of the runway to the left, and it hit the side of the runway and roll over, inverted, upside down. And the crash crew couldn't get to him before he was upside down in the mud, and they couldn't get to him in time, so he passed away as a result of that. And Jimmy Anderson, who was in the back seat of Larry Muszynski's airplane, the NFO, really a fine young man, and he sadly was killed in a skiing accident a few years later out in Colorado. Dave Edlett, who was Hank Kleeman's backseater, he returned from deployment, went to pilot training, became a Tomcat pilot, and then had a wonderful career in the Navy and retired as a Navy 3-star Vice Admiral. And Larry Muszynski survived all that, of course, and he became an airline pilot, had a great life. So, and then, of course, we know what happened to Snort. And so that people were involved in that whole thing kind of poignant in terms of the follow-on story.